welcome into another Couch Potato General Manager video. CPGM Juice flying solo on a 3-round mock draft post Super Bowl. And of course, we have our champion. The Kansas City Chiefs have gone back to back. We're going to discuss that a lot over the course of the next couple of weeks, that particular game, or at least the next couple of live streams. But wanted to get this mock draft done during the interim. Just get my immediate thoughts, right? Obviously, on our channel, it's an amalgamation of myself, CPGM Hadley, and Drew. But this is kind of what I would do. Not necessarily what I think is going to happen, but what I would do as of right now. Obviously, subject to change. A lot of time between now and the NFL draft, but it is absolutely NFL draft season. So let's get into this mock draft. For my money, it's one of two things here for the Chicago Bears at the top of the draft. Either you're, putting your lot in with Justin Fields and you're going to continue to stockpile draft capital, perhaps even some players in a trade here. Otherwise, I'm taking Caleb Williams. I know there's been a lot of discussion in terms of whether or not he's actually the top quarterback and his flaws and so on and so forth. And again, this is something that we're going to discuss ad nauseum. So I don't want to belabor the point here. But Caleb Williams is the top quarterback in this class to me. I think the concerns that folks have, I still think he's judicious with the football. He's not necessarily making turnover-worthy throws. I'm sold. If you want to go quarterback here at the top, Caleb Williams is the guy. All right. And of course, the Washington Commanders obviously have a need at the quarterback position as well. New coaching staff, obviously the new ownership group in here, Dan Quinn. Drake Maye. Drake Maye is QB2 for me at this point. I don't know that that's going to change. I don't know that it's going to change. I think he certainly possesses the traits and certainly the questions that you have with respect to Caleb Williams as it relates to him playing within structure. You don't necessarily have that with Maye. Maye, I think, needs more experience in terms of identifying things pre-snap in particular. I think he can be confused that way, but I truly believe that's something that can be coached up, and he has all the tools, absolutely. So Drake Maye, second overall to the Washington Commanders. That takes us to New England. And of course, the rumblings are that New England may not necessarily draft the quarterback here with the third overall selection. I don't know that that necessarily precludes them selecting a quarterback at all. Mac Jones clearly isn't the answer. Bailey Zappi, it certainly isn't the answer. So it really is a question as to whether or not they're sold on the likes of Jayden Daniels, Michael Penix. We're big fans of Michael Penix here at Couch Potato General Manager. JJ McCarthy, of course. I think the league is higher on JJ McCarthy. I don't even think it's a question. The league is certainly higher on JJ McCarthy than the media, than, draft prognosticators, fans, whatever the case may be. So it'll be interesting to see what New England does here. But if I were New England, if I were drafting for New England, what I would do here is I would actually trade down. And our trade partner will be the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Atlanta Falcons, with their new coaching staff, certainly, not to say that, New England has a new coaching staff, Atlanta has a new coaching staff. This is a pivotal position here. There's a pivotal decision here. I think Jayden Daniels is probably the next quarterback I take at this juncture in the pre-draft process. A little bit of a departure from where I've had things previously. It's been Michael Penix as QB3 for me for the better part of 2 seasons now, right? But I think in that particular landing spot, indoors, I really like what Jayden Daniels may be able to do. I really think dynamic with his legs. He demonstrated, he took his game to another level in terms of pushing the football down the field. I just like the idea of adding Jayden Daniels to that mix. You have Drake London, of course, you have Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts. I think you add another playmaker to that offense along with Jayden Daniels, who's a playmaker in his own right. And I think you're cooking with high grade. I think you're immediately in the thick of things, not as if you weren't a season ago, this past season, but I think you're right back in the thick of things in terms of the NFC South. All right, so we have the Falcons climbing up from the 8th overall pick to the 3rd overall pick here for the rights to select Jayden Daniels. What New England gets in return is the 8th overall selection, a 3rd round pick, an additional 3rd round pick here in the 2024 draft, a first next year, and a 4th round pick. We'll add that 136. I believe that's a 5th round selection, perhaps maybe a late 4th round selection there. In return, the Falcons get a 3rd overall pick, as I mentioned, and the 182nd pick in the 2024 draft. So let's make that move. All right. And of course, as I mentioned, we're going to take Jayden Daniels here. Again, I just like the landing spot. I like the landing spot. I understand that there's some other areas of this team that need to be addressed, but this particular organization, the division that they play in, I think competent quarterback play, and certainly I believe Jayden Daniels can develop into more than just a competent quarterback. I think he can be a difference maker, considering what they already have in place as far as their offensive line and some of the weapons. And of course, it's another weapon or two. I think they're ready to compete in the NFC South as early as 2024. That takes us to the Arizona Cardinals. And of course, the cupboard is bare at the receiver position. Unique opportunity here to select receiver one, and not by a lot for me, not by a lot. A bit of a razor's edge here. I'm a big fan of Malik Nabers, but let's go with Marvin Harrison Jr. here to the Cardinals. The Chargers are going to stay put, as far as I'm concerned. I think I've kind of batted this back and forth. Certainly, I think a trade is worth exploring. Teams that are interested in the likes of a JJ McCarthy certainly are going to be trying to angle for this fifth overall selection. So definitely want to pick up the phone there. But in my mock draft, I'm not as high, not quite as high as on JJ McCarthy as the NFL is. So let's go with Malik Nabers. I think he has the highest ceiling among all the receivers in this class, even higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. All right. That puts the New York Football Giants on the clock here. And the Giants could go a couple of different ways. If you're familiar with our channel, familiar with the mock drafts that we've done to this point, Penix has been a guy that we've selected here, sixth overall. We've had the Giants trade up. We've had the Giants go in a completely different direction. And I think for my purposes right now, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. But this is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit different, a little bit of a twist here. I think, and D Kit, man, just rock with me on this one. I think the Giants should, and I'm just thinking in terms of big toolsy quarterback like Josh Allen. All right. I kind of like the idea of Brian Dable getting a year or two here with Justin Fields and see if he can unlock something, right? I'm a big fan of Justin Fields, more of a fan of Caleb Williams in terms of, coming out as far as the quarterback position. But I believe Justin Fields can be a difference maker. I think Justin Fields could potentially land up in a number of different spots, including Atlanta, or in this case, let's go with New York. So let's put a trade together that acquires Justin Fields. And to tempt the Bears, we're actually going to trade down a few spots. To consummate this trade, the Bears will send the ninth overall pick in Justin Fields to the New York Giants, who will drop down a few spots here, give up the sixth overall pick, the 47th overall pick in the second round, and a fourth rounder next year. So effectively, you're dropping down three spots in the first round, and you're giving up a 2 and a 4 for Justin Fields in order to make this happen. And again, I just think there's some parallels in terms of the big arm, athletic nature of these two quarterbacks, and that, in terms of Josh Allen and Justin Fields. Of course, Brian Dable really was integral in terms of the development of Josh Allen. I think he might be able to pull something off here. So this obviously puts the Giants in a unique situation because Daniel Jones is probably not going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season. And frankly, I think it's time to move on, right? Considering the cap figure, you were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You caught lightning in a bottle last year, and then of course the bottom fell out this year, offensive line woes, so on and so forth. With this trade, I think you're still in position to either add a receiver or an offensive lineman to the mix to support the continued development of Justin Fields. I think being with Brian Dable, he actually is unlocked. This is the best situation he's been in. Even though it's not necessarily in full focus, I think from a coaching perspective, this would be the best situation Justin Fields has been in since he's entered the league. All right. So we have the Bears moving up, and they wanted their pick. They wanted their pick among the tackles here to protect Caleb Williams. And right now, listen, man, for a long time, it's been Olu fashion. I'm going to give Joe Alt the slight edge right now. Give him the slight edge. Just more consistent this past season. Is actually a little bit younger of a player as well. So Joe Alt is the pick here, 6 overall to Chicago. That takes me to the Tennessee Titans. They need to add weapons on the perimeter, their defense, and on the back end, the expiring contracts, guys that have underperformed. But I'm going to get Olu Fashion, who probably has the highest ceiling among all the tackles in this class. Not quite as adept at run blocking as a Joe Alt. I think Alt, is further along in that particular department, more physical player at this juncture. But I think Fashion comes in and really stabilizes that left tackle position here in Tennessee. All right. And of course, we had the trade earlier with the Falcons and the Patriots. Patriots dropped down from 3 to 8. You might think I might go quarterback here. I'm not. I'm actually going to add the third receiver ranked on my board. That's Rome Odunze. I think he's worth a top 10 pick. And whomever is playing quarterback will have a legitimate receiver one at their disposal in New England. We had the blockbuster trade that sent Justin Fields from Chicago to New York. That trade included a swap of first round picks. The Giants added a second round pick and a fourth round pick in 2025 to that deal. I mentioned, this would be the best coaching situation for Justin Fields to this point, right? And I think with a couple shrewd selections in this draft, along with another trade that I have in mind. Stay tuned for that. I think they can get this offense situated. Now they may have to wait a year until they get the defense finalized, right? But certainly, I think right here, ninth overall, got a question mark with Evan Neal at right tackle. Let's just answer the question. Let's answer the question with Talise Fuaga. And we're going to kick Evan Neal into guard. All right. We'll have him play between Fuaga and John Michael Schmitz. I think that's going to make Evan Neal a better player. And now you got 4/5 of your offensive line situated. All right. So this puts the Giants, certainly their running game, and the protection of Justin Fields. We're going to put that at the forefront of what we want to get accomplished here. So again, with that trade down, we net Talisa Fuaga as well as Justin Fields in a trade here for the New York Giants. I think if you look at it from a consensus perspective, not an ideal situation here for the New York Jets. But if I'm the Jets and I miss out on Alt Fashanu Fuaga, I'm perfectly fine with bolstering my offensive line to tackle position with Troy Fautanu, who I actually like a little bit more than Fuaga. I think Fuaga is the best right tackle in this class, and that's exactly what he's going to be doing. He's actually a more physical player than Fautanu as well. But in terms of pass protection, in terms of keeping 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers upright, I think Fautanu gets the job done. So 4 tackles in the first 10 selections, 3 receivers, and 3 quarterbacks, all offense to this point. All right, which takes us to the Minnesota Vikings. And I mentioned all offense. That's going to come to an end here. Let's go with Latu, the top edge rusher. We're expecting Daniil Hunter to test free agency. I'm a big fan of Latu. Check out the video on the channel, my breakdown of his the most advanced pass rush technique moves there is. I think he certainly can improve his power as far as his ability to affect the passer as well as play in space. He's a top defender in this class as far as I'm concerned. That takes us to the Denver Broncos, who obviously have a quarterback situation of their own. Again, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, could go in either of those 2 directions. But there's a guy here at the very top of the PFF draft board that I think this is as far as I let it go. Sean Payton obviously has a lot of success with the tight end position over the years. Actually, he actually played this past season, interestingly enough. But a receiving threat, i.e., Jimmy Graham, had enjoyed his best seasons under Sean Payton. I think Brock Bowers is actually a better football player than Jimmy Graham is or was. So let's go with Brock Bowers here, 12th overall to the Broncos, particularly with Jerry Jeudy probably on the outs. You got Cam Sutton, Marvin Mims. I expect his role to grow. You add Brock Bowers to that mix. Whoever's playing quarterback, you got a good trio of options in the passing game there. Takes us to the Raiders. Antonio Pierce led Raiders here, and I'm gonna do it, man. I think this is where the sweet spot is for Michael Penix. I know, that national championship game wasn't his best effort, and despite the fact that he didn't wow during the Senior Bowl, I thought he was probably had the second best week among all the quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler having the best. I'm still on board, man. I think that ability to make any throw opposite hash, those lasers, we call them laser Penix. Keep him upright. Keep him upright. Devontae Adams out there. We're gonna Michael Mayer. We got an opportunity to add some more weaponry to it. Michael Penix gives you a fighting chance here in the AFC West. All right, that takes us to the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints they don't have a third round pick. They have perhaps the worst cap situation in the NFL. They are beholden to Derek Carr. It's not an ideal situation with an aging roster. It really isn't an ideal situation. The left side of that offensive line, I guess maybe 3, even maybe 4 positions along the offensive line might be up for grabs here over the course of the next couple of seasons. So I think the Saints need to recoup some draft capital. I'm not sure if Trevor Penning is going to be part of the plans. If he is, great. If not, it's a sunk cost, and you got to fix it. You got to fix it. But you don't necessarily have a lot of assets in order to do so. So I think a trade down makes the most sense here for the Saints. The question is, who do we trade down with? And I think the team that comes to mind, considering some recent news coming out of Philadelphia, where Haason Reddick was given permission to explore a trade, seek out a trade. I think the Eagles with some roster attrition, some guys getting older, contracts expiring, they got to replenish that pass rush, especially with Hassan Reddick looking. Ultimately, what Hassan Reddick's looking for is a new contract, right? I think he's entering the last year of his deal with Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken, or he's not paid, to the degree that he'd like to be paid. So I think certainly the Eagles need to get out in front of that. So let's see if we can put something together here for New Orleans and Philadelphia. Philly's going to move up from 22 to 14. They're going to add the 50th, which is actually originally New Orleans' second round selection, and that third round pick. So we're going to come up 8 spots, and we do it without giving up next year's first rounder. So the Saints are kind of in a bind, man. Like I said, typically, you would be trying to recoup a 2025 first round pick in this particular type of trade, but considering their contract situation, their salary cap situation, and again, that's that aging roster. This is as good as it's going to get, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so with the Eagles trading up, I talked about the edge replenishing that group up front. I think you're really set, at least in terms of your starters, in terms of the interior with the Georgia boys. Let's go Dallas Turner here, man. That Dallas Turner to me is the next. There's a second ranked edge in the class. I think his physicality will play well here, and I think he's definitely growing. Showed a nice leap in terms of his pass rush from 2022 to 2023. All right. So we now have the Indianapolis Colts on the clock, and maybe a little bit of a run on the edges here. Let's go Jared Verse. Add him to the mix up front. DeForest Buckner still getting it done. Absolutely still getting it done. But I think he needs a running mate here in Jared Verse. That explosiveness, that first, second step on that fast track. Perhaps. I don't want to say anything blasphemous, but you get the thoughts. The thoughts come to mind of a Dwight Freeney and a Robert Matheson in terms of the explosiveness. I don't know that he has the types of secondary and tertiary pass rush moves. Certainly doesn't have the Freeney spin, but that explosiveness is reminiscent of those edge rushers during the Tony Dungy era. Takes us to the Seattle Seahawks. Mr. C. Prasky, I got you covered here. It's a simple decision for me. You got needs all along the interior of your offensive line, and the best interior offensive lineman, he's separated himself, Jackson Powers Johnson. Doesn't have to go too far here, landing in Seattle. The Jacksonville Jaguars this past season, obviously, very disappointing performance. I thought it was a very disappointing performance on both sides of the ball. Right, you had select individuals that played at a high level, but a lot of performances just came up lacking. Across the board. Trevor Lawrence to the defensive side of the ball, I thought the secondary really struggled. I want to add Terrion Arnold. He's still my cornerback one right now. It's tentative, but I'm going to add Terrion Arnold. His ability to play inside and outside the numbers is what kind of pushed him over the edge for me here. All right, I think he certainly goes a long way to helping that secondary. And as you can see, defense still wins championships, man. Defense still wins championships. So Terrion Arnold is the pick here. First corner off the board. The Bengals, they know what they have to do here, right? They have to the focus, the emphasis, at least initially, must be to keep Joe Burrow upright, keep him healthy. All right. If you have a healthy Joe Burrow, you have an opportunity to compete for a championship. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. So let's go with J.C. Latham, slot in here at right tackle. I believe Jonah Williams will be on his way out. That takes us to the Rams. With the Rams pick here, I'm going to add some teeth to that secondary. And I was blown away by the performance of Quinion Mitchell at the Senior Bowl. I had some questions coming in, and he answered them with sticky press coverage. The ball skills are top notch, perhaps best in the class as far as the corners are concerned. So Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo is the pick here. I've long since maintained that the Pittsburgh Steelers, as much as people are talking about the quarterback situation, and I do believe they will address the quarterback room either via free agency or trade. I don't know that they're going to select a quarterback in this particular draft, but I definitely think they're going to address that room for your free agency, force Kenny Pickett to compete, and I'm okay with that. I'll go on record and indicate that I didn't think the Kenny Pickett pick was necessarily a bad one, right? I think with the offensive line concerns and the coordinator concerns, I think those have certainly contributed to it, and of course he's dealt with some injuries. He's had some poor play, don't get me wrong, but I'm not ready to give up on him. But certainly, I think competition. Iron sharpens iron. I think he certainly needs some competition. I wouldn't have handed him the keys either. So In order to support whomever's playing quarterback, I think we need to solidify this offensive line. And I've maintained for a long time that they should have selected Creed Humphrey over Najee Harris, and they haven't been a above average offense since they let that offensive line deteriorate. They've made some strides here. I think there's a couple more pieces to make, and one of those pieces is going to be Amarius Mims, former teammate of Broderick Jones here. Slide him in at right tackle, move Broderick Jones over to left, and I think you're set at your tackles. For the Dolphins, I think offensive line is a huge need. I think it needs to be prioritized. And as far as fit is concerned, I don't know that there's a better player for that outside zone, that zone attack that Mike McDaniel employs out there than Graham Barton. So give me Graham Barton. And they have him listed as a tackle, but he's going to play any of those interior positions, whether it's center or guard. Graham Barton should be a plug and play starter here for Miami. Then, of course, we have the New Orleans Saints. All right. And of course, and as I mentioned before, we wanted to add some draft capital, and we managed to do that. Right. We managed to add a second and third round pick in this draft class. I also allude to the fact that they need to address their offensive line like yesterday. They have significant cap concerns, and the roster attrition is going to take place here. Perhaps not the guy that you're thinking as far as offensive tackles, but a guy that has kind of solidified the first round billing as far as I'm concerned. That's going to be Kingsley out of BYU, right? Some folks may see him, maybe closer to the turn there, first, second round turn. I like him right here. As far as left tackles are concerned, the guy that I am most confident in among those that remain is the BYU offensive tackle. Texans aren't going to waste any time here. They have some expiring contracts along the defensive line. I think Jerzon Newton at the three technique and D'Amico Ryan's system is going to have a ball next to Will Anderson. So Jerzon Newton is the selection here, followed by the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Cowboys, we saw that secondary get exposed, right? No, of course, no Trevon Diggs. Deron Bland was forced to play on the boundary, and while he had a ton of interceptions, pick sixes, he got abused later in the season. In the second half of the season, he really struggled. Want to move him back into the nickel. No Gilmore, no Jordan Lewis in 2024. That's my expectation. So give me Nate Wiggins, man, a guy that I really like at the cornerback position. All right, we have Jake's Green Bay Packers. David Bakhtiari has an obscene cap number. I just can't imagine him being on the roster, which means that you need to pair someone up with Zach Tom, right? The mismatch and the guys, the musical chairs, they seem to find a decent mix here, but I want to solidify it. I want to put it to bed. I want to put players where they should be. So opposite Zach Tom, let's go Tyler Guyton. All right, that takes us to the Drew's Bucks here. And what should I'm going to keep it simple. Cooper DeJean's been on the board for quite a bit. Let's get him off the board here. I think he can do a myriad of things in your secondary. There's question marks as far as, the long-time viability of Jamel Dean as far as his health. But even if you see Cooper DeJean as just a safety, I think this is a good landing spot for him in Tampa Bay. Cooper DeJean. All right, Kool-Aid McKinstry, comes at a bit of a discount here for the Arizona Cardinals, so we won't waste any time. Let's make that selection and bolster that secondary in Arizona. Buffalo Bills. So I think the natural inclination here, you see a couple of names here at the top of the board, a few names actually. Brian Thomas, there's obviously an appetite to improve the receiver room in Buffalo. But as I watch the Buffalo Bills play, and Josh Allen continue to mature and develop, and get some play calling with a little bit more balance here, I think Josh Allen has the ability to elevate guys around him, right? And I think if you funnel this passing game through Dalton Kincaid, I think they'll be just fine. That doesn't mean that they don't need to necessarily add receivers to the mix, but I'm not going to do it right here. In fact, I'm going to go in a different direction altogether. I want to play a little defense. Again, if you pay close attention to this playoff run, man, defense still wins championships. I want to be able to play some defense. I thought, Buffalo gave Kansas City, outside of San Francisco, the Super Bowl. I thought during the AFC playoffs, Buffalo gave Kansas City their best game. They just couldn't get any stops defensively. They couldn't necessarily get off the field. No playmakers with Matt Milano injured. Tre'Davious White injured, and he's battled injuries over the last several seasons. They just don't have enough playmakers. So I want to add a playmaker to the mix, a difference maker up front. Give me one of the biggest draft risers here, just in terms of the physicality and the presence that he's going to bring to this down line. Give me Darius Robinson out of Missouri. All right, AJ Epinesa contract set to expire. Gregory Rousseau took a step. Let's add Darius Robinson to the mix as well. Detroit, it's obvious they need to improve their back end, and I'm a big fan of Ennis Ray Straw Jr. I thought, just I was a little late to the party, but watching his tape, he's phenomenal. He's phenomenal, and I think he has an opportunity to actually help himself had he been able to play during the Senior Bowl week. Due to the practice, I believe he had a bit of an injury. So let's go Ray Straw here to Detroit, help out a secondary that really struggled at times. The Baltimore Ravens, again, one of the most disappointing performances of recent memory as far as how they approached that game in Kansas City. And I'm not sure if you've heard or not, but Chris Jones of Kansas City said this was absolutely the best team. They weren't necessarily the best team that day that they played them, but it was the best team that they faced all season. And I thought Baltimore missed a golden opportunity. Shut out Kansas City in the second half. Just got away from their identity, which is, we're gonna run the football, we're gonna play action, and then if need be, Lamar Jackson go be great. And it just never happened. It just never happened for whatever reason. Whether you're not trying to prove the narrative wrong, whatever the case may be, there were opportunities. And this was certainly a missed opportunity here. In order to stop the bleeding, I think they really do need to get that quintessential big play threat outside the numbers. I'm not saying that Zay Flowers can't stretch the field, but I think adding Brian Thomas to the mix gives you the size that they need on the boundary, as well as the ability to stretch the field, and also keeps a dangerous big play threat out of the hands of some conference foes here. So let's go with Brian Thomas to the Baltimore Ravens. Fourth receiver off the board here, San Francisco, man. And again, I'm not going to belabor the point. We're going to talk a lot about San Francisco and what they could have done differently in the Super Bowl. But as far as keeping themselves in the thick of things, and of course, they've been in the thick of things for the last few seasons here outside of, one really, you know, injury plagued season. I think a trade down makes sense here, right? When you got some contracts that are going to be coming up as far as negotiations are concerned. I think you need more stabs at it. I think you need additional draft capital. You have drafted pretty well. You've drafted pretty well. So give yourself an opportunity to continue to replenish this roster and prepare yourself for some eventual attrition. All right. So I teased it earlier. As far as, perhaps getting a quarterback later for the New England Patriots. And I think this is the time, right? You want to take advantage of the fifth-year option by selecting your quarterback in the first round. San Francisco can add some draft capital without dropping too far down. Just a few spots here. So let's exchange 31 and 34. New England will also get San Francisco's actual third round pick. They have a compensatory pick in the third round as well, but their 94th overall pick. And San Francisco will get 74 and a fifth round selection next year. So they're going to, by dropping down 3 spots, they're actually going to gain 20 spots here in the third round. All right. Question is, who did I trade up for? Well, if you're going to roll the dice, I think if you're going to roll the dice at this juncture, the guy is JJ McCarthy, right? Still a relative unknown, but there's been some flashes, some really impressive flashes throughout. I think by taking him in the first round, you have that fifth-year option to play with, but you didn't necessarily have to leverage the third overall pick in this particular scenario. Now, of course, I don't think that's how things are going to play out, but based on how I have evaluated these players to this point, this is the point in which I would feel comfortable selecting JJ McCarthy. So McCarthy is a pick here. And with the final selection in the first round, Kansas City Chiefs, they keep on doing it, man. They keep on finding a way. I think they're going to have to replace Chris Jones, and I don't think one player is going to do it. I really don't think one player is going to be able to replace that type of impact. L'Jarius Sneed is slated to be an unrestricted free agent as well. But there's a guy that has been climbing and actually is probably going a little bit later in my mock draft than most. That's Byron Murphy. I think that's a good first step in terms of replacing that production, that presence, that timely presence from Chris Jones in the middle of that defense. So that does it for the first round. Quite a few trades. All right. So at this point, my assumption is Carolina has found a way to bring in a veteran receiver to help take the pressure off a lackluster core at this point. All right. So we're not going to force the issue, or we're not going to take a receiver here. We already have our guy in tow, whether it be Michael Pittman or T Higgins. Um, he's going to be the focal point of our offense, of our passing attack. So with this first selection at the top of the second round, the focus is going to be on protecting Bryce Young. Offensive line was atrocious last year. And with the smaller quarterback, the shortest quarterback, I really want to make sure the interior of the offensive line is bolstered. So I'm going to start with perhaps a forgotten guy. And PFF certainly isn't that high on him, but I am. I absolutely am. Give me Cooper BB, man. Give me Cooper BB at any of those interior spots. And he's going to keep Bryce Young clean. All right. I mentioned we traded down, of course, the Patriots climbing into the first round late to select JJ McCarthy. The 49ers drop a few spots, also climb about 20 spots in the third round as part of that trade. Right here, they too need to address their offensive line, and I can't think of a better fit outside of perhaps Zach Frazier than Christian Haynes. I love what Christian Haynes brings to the table, and I think he's a plug and play guy. He's going to really excel in this particular scheme here. All right, Arizona on the clock. So with the first couple of selections, we got Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kool-Aid McKinstry. The Cardinals have a lot of ammunition here, so we're going to continue to just add talent to the roster. Right, they're going through that transition. They made the necessary trades in order to garner a lot of draft capital. It's time to put it to work here. So right here, give me Chop Robinson. I'm going to add him opposite BJ Ojolari. Those are your bookends now. Right? We're screaming off the edge with speed here. Give me Chop Robinson. Next up, we have the Commanders. And of course, we took Drake May with the second overall pick. I think it's important that we keep Drake May upright. But we have the 36th pick here in the second round as well as the 40th. So I'm actually going to prioritize the other side of the line of scrimmage. Braylon Trice, you traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young. The cupboard is bare. Braylon Trice should slot in nicely here. That takes us to the Los Angeles Chargers. I couldn't help myself. Went with Malik Nabers with the fifth overall selection. We're gonna now turn our attention to this defense, and we're gonna actually build it the right way. All right, which is through the middle, absolutely. And as far as guys in the middle of the defense, there isn't anyone in this draft quite like Tavondre Sweat. So give me big Tavondre Sweat to be the anchor of this Chargers defense. Open things up for Thule. So Tennessee is on the clock here. We went with Olu Fashanu in the first round. You don't have a full complement of draft selections in the 2024 NFL draft. So I think a trade down, not too far, but I think a trade down is something to consider here. And the team that I'm going to trade down with, team that's trading up, is the Cincinnati Bengals. All right. So in the first round, we managed to get that right tackle position squared away with JC Latham. I think it's now time to add a receiving option opposite Jamar Chase with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins moving on. So let's see. Let's get the trade done here. The Titans are going to slide down about 9 spots to climb 27 spots with their third selection here. So didn't have a third round pick before. Now they do. And we'll tack on the 252 here as well. So let's make this trade. And of course, as I mentioned, I did not bury the lead. The Bengals trade up for a receiver, and I think while there are other receivers that I like more on the board, I just think in terms of the fit and the complement to Jamar Chase, I think it's ideal. Again, you're getting Joe Burrow back. Want to add a nice red zone weapon here to the mix. Losing T. Higgins, bringing Keon Coleman and his ability to play above the rim. Okay, D-Kit, we're back on the clock here with the New York Giants. First round, they were fireworks, man. We traded down, also acquired Justin Fields. Here we are now. With the 39th overall pick. And D-Kit, just rock with me. I know you got your eyes on perhaps another guard to solidify that offensive line. It's coming. It's coming. But I think I want to help out Justin Fields in a different way. All right. So we started with Fuaga, but now I want to get him a receiver. And I talked about earlier Buffalo and perhaps approaching things a little bit differently. It did not end well in Buffalo as far as the receivers are concerned. And while I'm not certain that Buffalo will move Stefon Diggs, I think it could be a blessing in disguise at this juncture, right? Considering some of the tumultuous nature of the relationship, and again, the fact that Stephon Diggs did not play well down the stretch, I think reimagining this offense in Buffalo makes sense, and really dedicating resources as the cap becomes a bit more of a challenge to the defensive side of the ball, considering you have such a talented quarterback, makes sense to me, right? I believe Josh Allen has the ability to elevate guys around him. That doesn't mean that we're going to outfit it with a bunch of no names, but certainly I think we can leverage some of the star power that we've had on the offensive side of the ball previously to really bolster the defense, which has been the Achilles heel as of late, last couple of seasons. As far as I'm concerned, that has been the Achilles heel in Buffalo. So let's make a trade here. We're gonna reunite Stefon Diggs with Brian Dable. So I mentioned I think Brian Dable is could unlock Justin Fields. I think we saw what Justin Fields did with a legitimate receiver one and DJ Moore. I think Stefon Diggs with kind of a new license on life here, new scenery, with back with Brian Dable and Justin Fields. I think this could benefit both teams. You're going to kind of have to bear with me, Buffalo fans. Bills are electric. You're going to have to bear with me in terms of the vision here, but I'm just thinking Buffalo needs to approach it differently in order to get over the hump. So Stefon Diggs is on the block. The Giants will get Diggs and a fourth round pick next year because we do need that draft capital. We have a lot of holes, a lot of expiring contracts, a lot of older players here in Buffalo. And of course, we're trading away a player. So we need that draft capital. The Bills will get the 39th overall pick, round 5 next year, and 140 this year. The Bills are going to have to draft well over the next several seasons. And as I mentioned, I want to place a particular emphasis on the defense here. We went with Darius Robinson in the first round. We're going to follow that up on the defensive side of the ball again. So again, Bills fans, I know you want receivers. I know you want at least a receiver. You might need multiple receivers now, but I'm gonna work it out for you. Just rock with me here. Change this team, the look of this team, and get back to being able to play championship caliber defense. I talked about it earlier, a couple picks ago, in terms of being strong up the middle. It really was an eyesore, particularly when Matt Milano went down. They had a couple injuries to the second level of the defense. I'm gonna bring in the top linebacker in the class as far as I'm concerned, and that's Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M. I think what Tremaine Edmonds ultimately developed into. I think Edmonds is certainly, or rather Cooper is certainly capable of that. And I think it just they were just a different team when they didn't have that upper echelon play at the second level of their defense. So give me Edgerrin Cooper here. All right, as I mentioned, Bills fan, we're changing our approach here. We cannot afford not to have difference makers on the defensive side of the ball. Again, I think Josh Allen is a special talent, and we will find the right pieces to put around him. But we need difference makers on the defensive side of the ball to get over the hump in the AFC. That takes us to the Washington Commanders, and the Commanders have been busier to this point. This is actually their third selection in the first 40 picks. Drake Maye and Braylon Trice were the first two selections. I alluded to it previously. Let's get to the offensive line. Let's get to the offensive line and start to protect our young quarterback. And what better way to do that than addressing the pivot? Let's bolster the center position, the quarterback of the offensive line. Zach Frazier is the pick. Okay, Jake, we're back on the clock here with Green Bay, and while Cam Kitchens is my guy, I just think I just can't see it any other way, man. Tyler Nubin to Green Bay. My mind is set on it. My mind is set on it. I think he's the cleanest prospect at the safety position. The run fits are phenomenal. That was a bit of an issue for Green Bay. Nubin is the selection here to Green Bay. Okay, so the Vikings are on the clock. We went with Latu in the first round. What do we follow that up with? What do we do for an encore here? And I haven't mentioned this yet, but I do believe Minnesota ultimately brings back Kirk Cousins. I think they bring back Kirk Cousins. Even if they, let's say Minnesota gets aggressive and they go and get a quarterback, in the top 5, 6 selections, right? JJ McCarthy, for example. I don't think McCarthy's ready to play immediately. I simply don't think. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that Minnesota decides to get aggressive and climb in the first round into the top 5 to 6 selections, right? And they end up with a JJ McCarthy, for example. I don't think JJ McCarthy's ready to play immediately. So I think you're looking at a bit of a 2-year type of deal here with Kirk Cousins coming off the injury, but that's what I'm operating under. I'm operating under the guys that Kirk Cousins will be back, and Kirk Cousins likes to get to his spot, whether it be a 3-5 or 7-step drop, and just stand there and deliver. So we need to make sure the interior of the offensive line is bolstered. Jordan Morgan is listed as a tackle, but the shorter arms, I think, are going to push him inside, and I think he's going to be really good inside. All right, I think he has tackle feet. I think he has elite grip strength when he gets his hands locked in. I think the arm length is a bit of a concern at the tackle position, but you're good there with Brian O'Neill, Christian Darrisaw. Let's move Jordan Morgan inside, and I think you have the makings of a really good offensive line now. The Falcons were a part of the very first trade in this mock draft. We traded from the 8th overall pick up to the 3rd in order to select Jayden Daniels. I mentioned that the Falcons are just a couple pieces away on offense from being one of the more explosive offenses in the league. And we're going to make sure that we make this happen, right? I can hear it in my head, Headley screaming that we need defense, and I'm not suggesting that they don't, but with that young quarterback coming in, I want to pair Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson with a guy who can really take the top off the defense, and Troy Franklin is certainly capable of that. So Troy Franklin is the pick. All right, just imagine Troy Franklin on that fast track in that dome, man. All right. He's going to see a ton of single coverage with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and then, of course, teams having to respect Bijan Robinson out of the backfield. So I really like the makings of this offense. Okay, that takes us to the Raiders. They retained Antonio Pierce. We're putting our lot in with Michael Penix. That was the selection 13th overall. So what do we do here in the second round? There's a corner that I think actually could end up being selected in the first round, sliding a bit here. That's an area of this team that is you have a number of different guys with expired contracts or expiring contracts, and it's certainly an area of the football team that they can stand to improve. So let's go with Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia here. The New Orleans Saints are on the clock. Those of you who may have been bouncing around in this particular mock draft, we traded down because we didn't have a 3rd round pick. We have a bad cap situation. We have an aging roster. All right. Traded down with the Eagles. Eagles select Dallas Turner. We end up selecting Kingsley out of BYU, the offensive tackle. I'm a big fan of his game. I've been really impressed. The more and more I watch him, the more I like. You have question marks along both sides of the line of scrimmage. Another favorite of mine, another draft favorite of mine on the defensive side of the ball here, as Cam Jordan gets longer in the tooth. Again, expiring contracts, injuries, guys not performing up to expectation. Brandon Doyless gives you a lot of flexibility. Again, we talk about how the Saints are in a very challenging situation as far as roster construction and the way the cap is formulated, the way the money is distributed, and how much money is tied up in the guarantees. Like it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy getting themselves situated here. But I think Brandon Doyless certainly makes that challenge a little easier as far as his flexibility to play so many different positions along the defensive line. So Brandon Doyless is the pick. So in the first round with the Indianapolis Colts, we went with the edge. All right. Michael Pittman is probably on his way out. In this particular scenario, he might be a Carolina Panther. So let's add somebody for our young quarterback, Anthony Richardson, to throw the football to. And I'm gonna go a little off my typical page here. It's just I'm just thinking in terms of that turf and the skill set with that big armed quarterback. I'm gonna go with Adonai Mitchell here. I'm gonna go with Adonai Mitchell, guy that can give you a big catch radius, does a great job of separating late. Of course, you still have Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor in the mix. I like it. I like the options we have on the offensive side of the ball in Indianapolis with Adonai Mitchell being added to the mix. Okay, the Bears did some things. We did some things. Of course, we decided to stay put at 1, drafted Caleb Williams. We actually send Justin Fields in the 9th overall pick to the Giants to move up to the 6th overall spot. And of course, we added the 2nd round pick as part of that trade because, of course, the Bears had traded their 2nd round pick in order to acquire Montez Sweat. So Working the draft board here, working the draft board here. From a defensive perspective in Chicago, I like what some of their young players did this past season. All right. I think it's time. I think it's time to move on from Eddie Jackson. Just the level of play and the cap figure don't make sense. You have Jalen Johnson, who's slated to be an unrestricted free agent. You need to get that done. Think you absolutely need to bring him back. Use that money that otherwise is being held by Eddie Jackson to pay Jalen Johnson, who's one of the better corners in the league. Of course, we would need a replacement for Eddie Jackson to put next to Jaquan Brisker, and I got just the guy. I got just the guy. My favorite safety in the class, Cameron Kitchens. Be sure to check out that video on the channel. Okay, that takes us to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we selected Terrion Arnold in the first round. Really wanted to add some teeth to the defense. So this was lackluster, right? Outside of Josh Allen, Travon Walker took a step. You had some individuals who played okay, sometimes brilliantly, but it just never came together for the entire unit on either side of the ball here. Um, I think we need to do a better job up front. I think we need to do a better job up front on the offensive side of the ball as much as the defensive side of the ball. Give me one of our big draft board risers coming out of the Senior Bowl here. Give me Dominic Pooney, who could play any of those interior offensive line positions. Tackle by trade at the collegiate level, but the way he made that transition to the interior guard and center during the Senior Bowl leaves me very confident that he could be a plug and play guy for Jacksonville. Okay, so we had the trade down here in the second round with the Tennessee Titans. We were originally at 38. We traded down to 49, added some additional draft capital because Tennessee is in a bit of a rebuild for sure. They're in a bit of a rebuild here. Another big Senior Bowl riser is who I'm eyeing here at the receiver position, and that's going to be Roman Wilson. And some folks might be look at all these guys on the board that you're passing up. I think Roman Wilson was just simply underutilized because Michigan had a very specific formula in terms of how they were going to win this year. Watching him in Mobile live and seeing the flashes throughout his collegiate career, certainly, but watching him in Mobile live, I came away thoroughly impressed by his route running, his hands, the consistent hands, his ability to take the top off the defense. I mean, he was uncoverable, right? He was one of the few guys that could just kind of after a day or two just kind of shut it down. So you have Traylon Burks, you have DeAndre Hopkins. Burks the injury concern there. Hopkins, your possession guy. Roman Wilson can be the guy that is your Z, moves along. You put him in motion, create some favorable matchups, and consistently make plays for Will Levis here. So give me Roman Wilson. Speaking of trades, this is the pick that one of the picks that the Saints netted in the trade with Philadelphia. So again, the Eagles traded from 22 to 14. Saints slid down. We've taken a tackle. We took a defensive lineman here in Brandon Dorlus in the second round. We're going to follow that up with another offensive lineman. Again, as I mentioned, the Saints have a lot of work to do along the offensive line, trying to get that thing built up. You're stuck. You're stuck with Derek Carr, so you need to keep him upright, right? You need to also be able to open up holes up front. I think they're going to be able to run left for sure if they decide to play it that way. Let's give me Christian Mahogany. Rams are back on the clock and selected a corner in the first round, Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo. I think the Rams need to continue to bolster their defense here as they continue to kind of, reinvent themselves to a degree here. A lot of young players have really stepped up. They drafted incredibly well a season ago. Quinion Mitchell, immediately your best defender in the secondary. Bryant Young, Kobe Turner up front. There's a lot of young talent, and I'm going to add another piece to this mix here with Chris Braswell. I'm not finished just yet, but we started the process of solving the offensive line in Pittsburgh, right? And I think by doing that, you'll get a better sense of what Kenny Pickett is actually capable of, assuming he wins the job. But I want to pair somebody up with Joey Porter Jr. As I've talked about before, certainly on Twitter at CPGM_Juice. Joey Porter Jr. was a first round pick as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I had him as I believe the second ranked corner in the class. All right. And he actually fell out of the first round. There weren't 32 guys, 31 guys, however many picks there were in the first round last year, better than Joey Porter Jr. I'm going to add another big, long, physical corner here in TJ Tampa opposite Joey Porter Jr. Okay, so Offensive line screaming, glaring issue here in Miami as far as the roster is concerned. Went Graham Barton in the first round. I think he's a perfect fit for what they want to do offensively. I'm going to go to the opposite side of the line of scrimmage here and replenish, bolster that group. I want to keep the local kid home here. Leonard Taylor out of Miami. Okay. And now the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles are back on the clock. And there's a lot of consternation in terms of what the Eagles need to do, right? They're balancing the immediate as well as the future, right? So there's one foot in, one foot out. The way Howie Roseman has built this roster is giving him enough flexibility in order to approach things that way, right? To kind of stay ahead of the curve, right? May not necessarily be a guy that's going to help you immediately, but within the next year or so, he's going to be a mainstay. So I'm looking at it the same way. Not sure exactly what's going to happen with Lane Johnson. So I want to make sure that we have his replacement in tow. Of course, Jason Kelsey's moving on. That means Cam Jurgens is going to move to center. I imagine Tyler Steen will elevate. I want to put myself in a position to be able to do that. It may not necessarily happen in 2024, but I want to be ready to go at the right tackle position if and when Lane Johnson decides to call it quits. So let's go with Patrick Paul right here out of Houston. Cleveland Browns making their first appearance in this mock draft. And typically, you see the name here staring me in the face. Chris Jenkins is the guy I select here, but I'm going to go in a little bit different direction as far as players. Same position, just a little bit of a different skill set, right? I want to get a little bit more internal pass rush, a little more quickness as far as the pass rush is concerned. So I'm gonna opt for Michael Hall Jr. And I think PFF has him a bit low here in the rankings, but he's I like to call it a Tasmanian devil, man. The spin move in the interior of that defensive line, the quickness, and the tenacity that he plays with, I think is going to be a nice fit along the defensive line. Not a whole lot of holes here on the Cleveland roster, but this is an area I think they certainly can stand to improve. So there's definitely some roster attrition for the Cowboys in the secondary. So we opted for Nate Wiggins in the first. I think you're staring some of the same thing here along the offensive line, right? And because I'd like to keep Tyler Smith at guard, I'm going to roll the dice a little bit here. All right. Our offensive tackle out of Yale is going to be the selection here. Now, we're talking 36-inch arms, all the raw physical tools. Historically, Dallas has done a great job of developing offensive linemen. I'm not sure if they're quite at that same level. No, Bill Callahan. He's actually in Tennessee now. He's moved on. Been a while since he's been in Dallas, but certainly Dallas had a nice run of developing offensive linemen here. If they can do so with this young man out of Yale, I think they'll be in great shape. Packers on the clock again, man. Lot of picks here from Green Bay. It would seem they've only made two to this point, but they have two in the second round. We started it off with Tyler Guyton in the first, followed that up with Tyler Nubin. He just seems like a Green Bay Packer. I'm going to be my system probably won't know how to react if he ends up in a different uniform when the draft actually takes place. What do we do? What do we do here with the third selection in the draft for Green Bay? I like their corners. I'm a huge Jair Alexander fan. I thought he was cornerback one in that class, by the way. And when healthy, he is absolutely a difference maker, right? He can change the game with his play on the boundary. Um, they've just struggled with injuries. The secondary has struggled with injuries. We started with Tyler Nubin. I want to go back to the secondary here, and perhaps the best nickel defender in this class is Mike Sanders, still out of Michigan. I think he would come in and now you have a formidable secondary here in Green Bay. Drew's Bucks back on the clock here. And I know Drew is saying, hey, get me some offensive line, fix the interior of my offensive line. I'm not gonna do it, Drew. I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna go to the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, or rather the opposite side of the ball here. I'm gonna go to the defensive side of the ball. Levante David is getting older, man. Don't expect him back. He's getting older. The Devin White era is over. You need in this defense, Todd Bowles defense, you need second level defenders, man. You need second level defenders, and I think the next best guy here, despite the injury concerns, is Peyton Wilson. All right, so that's Cooper DeJean and Peyton Wilson with our first two selections for the Bucks. Texans back on the clock. Jerzon Newton was our first round selection. We're going to stay on the defensive side of the ball here, a corner that has really grown on me. with his physicality and the size that he possesses on the boundary, his man coverage ability. I think PFF is entirely too low on him. Give me Cam Hart opposite Derek Stingley. Okay. So we have those Buffalo Bills back on the clock, and I'm sure Bills are electric. Buffalo fans are infuriated at this point, or perhaps they see the vision. Darius Robinson trade up to acquire Edrin Cooper, first two levels of the defense. Should we go to the third level of the defense? I'm tempted to. I'm tempted to, but I think my guy has been on the board just a bit too long. We want to address that receiver position. We did trade away Stefon Diggs, right? We did trade it away. It is absolutely Josh Allen's team. There will be no debate, no frustration, no arguments, whatever the case may be. Let's add Xavier again. I think his upside is immense. Just got to stay healthy. Just got to stay healthy so he can continue to develop. We haven't made a trade in a while, and I really do think it's about that time. I mentioned at the top, I mentioned in the first round that the Philadelphia Eagles have granted Hassan Reddick permission to seek a trade, and I think the Detroit Lions are in a position that they were a half away from a Super Bowl berth this past season, um, just a few weeks ago. So I think after addressing the cornerback position, let's push our chips to the middle of the table here. Let's push our chips in the middle of the table and take another run at it. You have the cap flexibility in order to do so at this juncture. Let's add Hassan Reddick. So we're going to make a trade with the Philadelphia Eagles here. So the Lions will part with the 61st overall pick and 207. The Lions will get back 160 in this deal along with Hassan Reddick. Okay, so what do the Eagles do here? It's not going to be as sexy as you like. You know, Howie Roseman has a penchant for those Georgia Bulldogs. I think Javon Bullard is the flexibility that he offers in the secondary, especially with Kevin Byard being, 1 year remaining on his deal. Sidney Brown coming off the injury, probably not going to be ready at the start of the season here. I like the idea of Bullard and Sidney Brown ultimately at the safety position moving into 2025, but it also helps you as a nickelback. He's not quite as boisterous as Chauncey Gardner Johnson, but I think he could have a similar type of impact on this defense. So let's go with Javon Bullard here. All right, that takes us back to the Baltimore Ravens, and we select Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU in the first round, get our big receiver on the perimeter. And now we need to figure out how to kind of recapture that magic we had defensively, right? We have some expiring contracts, guys moving on. Some extensions I'm sure will be coming as well. So we got to continue to draft well, which the Ravens historically have done a phenomenal job of drafting. There's an edge player that I like. Clowney probably won't be back. I don't see them extending Odafe Owe long term. Dissa Isaac is a guy that I really like. I think he slots in nicely here to Baltimore. I'm going to do something here that may seem a little counterintuitive, but again, I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking ahead, and I'm thinking in terms of how San Francisco deploys their players. You got guys like Chris Conley and Juwan Jennings making plays in the Super Bowl. Brandon Ayuk is going to be slated for an extension here soon. I think the receiver room is an area that you're going to have to address, right? Even despite the fact that the offense goes through Christian McCaffrey, I think they need some more physicality on the perimeter. They actually were out physicaled in the Super Bowl, not for the duration of the game. I think the both defensive lines really took the fight to the opposing offensive line, but I thought the back seven from Kansas City was just simply more physical than San Francisco was offensively. So let's bring in Brendan Rice, man. Let's bring in Brendan Rice, Jerry's son. The legacy here projects as a legitimate X. Even if you bring Brandon Ayuk back, of course you have Debo Samuel there. I think Brendan Rice just gives you a different level of physicality in terms of run blocking, in terms of, and again, you got to replace some of that utility that Jawan Jennings and that has offered. I just think, considering Debo's penchant for soft tissue injuries and all things considered, I think Brendan Rice fits in really well for more reasons than one. Okay, so Kansas City back on the clock in the first round. We started the process, the healing process, because I'm not expecting Chris Jones back, unless, of course, he takes a bit of a discount. I'd be surprised if that were the case. Byron Murphy in the first round. We could stand to go back to the defensive side of the ball here, right? Kansas City definitely demonstrated that defense wins championships. L'Jarius Sneed is likely going to cash in big. Cornerback is in play, but even with Travis Kelce intimating that he's going to be back, I think you add a weapon. I think you can add a weapon here. I think now is the time to add a weapon. And the skill set that Xavier Worthy possesses is what Andy Reid is trying to lock down in this offense, right? Since they moved off of Tyreek Hill, they've been looking for that guy, whether it be Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, of course, Justin Watson and MVS have been the primary field stretchers. Of course, Nicole Hardman comes out of nowhere and was a difference maker with the big chunk play as well as a game-winning touchdown here. Xavier Worthy fits the bill perfectly, and I think he's a better player than all those guys that I mentioned outside of Tyreek Hill, of course. So Xavier Worthy is the pick here at the end of the second round. All right, so now we enter the third and final round of this mock draft. And once again, the Carolina Panthers get us started. And I'm going to take a guy that I really like, right? We started off doing the right thing. All right, we got Cooper Beebe. We could stand to go back to the offensive line, but I think Cooper Beebe goes a long way to really solidifying the interior of the offensive line. And that's what you want with a smaller quarterback. The Kyler Murrays, the Drew Breeses of the world, those guys, Russell Wilson, you want to make sure that interior portion of the pocket is really kept clean. So good start there. Let's add another weapon. And by another weapon, I'm assuming T. Higgins is in the fold. Let's get a different kind of threat here. A guy that I'm a huge fan of. I think he can be a difference maker. Just get the ball in his hands. Malachi Corley. And this is what Carolina was missing. They were just missing guys who could make some plays. You know what I'm saying? Extension, an extended handoff type of situation. And Malachi Corley has shown me that he's a bit more polished from a route running perspective than I had initially anticipated after watching him live at the Senior Bowl. So give me Malachi Corley, add into T. Higgins, continue to work on that offensive line. We'll address that defense later. We got to protect Bryce Young. We got to rebuild that confidence. We saw a couple flashes of brilliance, but we got to keep him upright and get the ball out of his hands and into the hands of the playmakers. So Malachi Corley here with the 65th overall pick to the Panthers. Actually, I have 3 selections here in the third round for Arizona. Just to catch you up, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kool-Aid McKinstry in the first round, Chop Robinson in the second round. And to get the third round started, I'm gonna go to the second level of the defense. I just think in terms of the scheme, Junior Colson is the best fit here for Arizona at the second level of the defense, area that they really need to bolster. Okay. Commanders back on the clock. This is another team that has been quite busy. Drake Maye in the first round, followed by Braylon Trice and Zach Frazier, really bolstering the trenches to this point. I want to go on the perimeter. We got to play a little defense on the perimeter. It's a passing league. A guy that is climbing, man. He's absolutely climbing. You can see him rise in PFF's rankings is Jarvis Brownlee Jr., sticky in man coverage. We have New England back on the clock. Let's recap New England. Rome Odunze in the first round after a trade down, mind you. We traded back into the first round and acquired J.J. McCarthy. No second round selection as a result of that trade. But here we are in the third round with the 68th overall pick. And New England's in need of a tackle. All right. And I'm going to opt for Blake Fisher here. Right. Nothing sexy, but very steady player here in Blake Fisher. The Bolts are back on the clock. What have we done to this point with the Bolts? Let's recap it real quick. Malik Nabers, 5th overall. I love Malik Nabers. Tavondre Sweat really wanted to bolster the interior of this defense, right up the middle, right? We really wanted to get that situated, get the anchor in place. Now, as I mentioned previously with the Commanders, I think it's time to move towards the boundary. And another player I came away really impressed by, not just from his film, but also seeing him live in Mobile, was Chris Abrams-Drain. There's some roster attrition here in the secondary, right? It's going to look different. So let's add Chris Abrams-Drain to the mix. Okay, D-Kit. All right, the Giants are back on the clock. What have we done here? Now we need to take our time with this particular recap. All right, we traded down in the first round 3 spots. In that trade, we also netted Justin Fields. So Fuaga, Justin Fields in tow. In the second round, we had the 39th overall pick. We traded that and acquired Stefon Diggs, some additional draft capital as well. But we actually acquired Stefon Diggs. So now you have Justin Fields and Stefon Diggs. I believe Darius Slayton may not have been part of that trade, but he should have been part of that trade. So that maybe have been an oversight on my behalf, but I think you have Darius Slayton going to the Bills, offsetting some of those contract concerns there with Buffalo. The Giants don't have a great cap situation, but it's certainly better than what Buffalo is facing. And the Bills selecting Edgerrin Cooper in their stead. The 47th overall pick was owned by the Giants, but again, as part of that trade with the Bears, they select Cam Kitchen. So here are the Giants back on the clock, 70th overall. And DK, we're going to put the finishing touches on this offensive line, man. We're going to put the finishing touches on it. From left to right, it's going to be Andrew Thomas, Zach Zinter, John Michael Schmitz, Evan Neal, and Talisa Fuaga. We'll see what we can do defensively, but we really wanted to get this offense situated. And I think the Giants are going to be able to score points this year, for sure. The Cardinals have 3 selections here in the 3rd round. Let's recap what we've done to this point. Marvin Harrison Jr., Kool-Aid McKinstry in the 1st round, Chop Robinson, followed by Junior Colson. We need somebody to pave the way. We need somebody to pave the way for Junior Colson. And the man for the job is Chris Jenkins out of Michigan. All right, that takes us back-to-back Wolverines here. And in fact, I think there's 3 Wolverines here in the first 7 or so picks in the 3rd round. That puts the Jets on the clock. Of course, the Jets took offensive tackle Troy Fautanu with the 10th overall pick. We got to keep Aaron Rodgers healthy this year. We got to open up additional. I mean, Breece Hall doesn't need a whole lot, but certainly Fautanu can help in that regard as well. What do we follow that up with here? I think receiver. I think we're pushing our chips in the middle of the table. The defense got exposed a little bit, but because they were hung out to dry quite a bit, right? So let's continue to add weaponry to the mix, and a guy I think just can serve as a bit of a safety blanket for Aaron Rodgers is Ladd McConkey. Got Garrett Wilson out there. Add McConkey to the slot, and now you got multiple guys who can route up defenders. We take Enos Rakestraw in the 1st round here with Detroit, and then we follow it up with a trade. We traded our 2nd round pick to the Eagles to acquire Haason Reddick, who obviously has been given permission to seek a trade. We're going for it. We're absolutely going for it. We're going to address the eyesores on this defense. We're going to go back to the cornerback position here, continue to bolster this group. Give me some size. I want a bigger player who can match up against certain types of receivers. Give me Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. All right, the 49ers are back on the clock here, and there was a trade down in the 1st round. All right, we swapped picks with the New England Patriots, ultimately selected Christian Haynes to help a offensive line that needed some help, right? Brendan Rice was our 2nd round selection late in the 2nd round. I think you're going to have some changes to this roster, and the physicality that he brings on the perimeter, I think, is going to be well received, as well as the fact that, of course, he is the great Jerry Rice's son. In the 3rd round here, I want to go back to the offensive line. And I think for my money at this point in my evaluation process, the next best offensive tackle is Javon Foster out of Missouri. So let's go with Foster here. All right, that takes us to the Chicago Bears. And of course, we have a new quarterback, new trigger man here in Chicago, Caleb Williams, traded up with the Giants to acquire Joe Alt. And of course, get one of my favorite players in the draft here in the 2nd round, and Cameron Kinchins. Move Justin Fields to the Giants as well. So Montez Sweat, obviously difference maker after he was acquired via trade. I want to continue to bolster that down line. And I think a guy who's really grown on me, a guy that I really like, appreciate the flexibility and the versatility to play inside and out and be disruptive, is Marshawn Nealon out of Western Michigan. Broncos up next. A number of different areas I can go in, but this is perhaps one of the better landing spots for a guy like Bo Nix. So to play with Sean Payton, his track record obviously speaks for itself. Let's go with Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos. All right, up next we have the Las Vegas Raiders, and we got our quarterback in Michael Penix with the 13th overall pick. I'm all in on Penix. And then, of course, we got a cornerback that could very well end up in the bottom of the 1st round of the actual draft, Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia. I think we need to continue to bolster the defense, right? Certainly, there's some areas on the offensive side of the ball that we could stand to improve, but there's that down line, man. I need somebody. I need Tyree Wilson to take that step next year. Of course, you know what you're going to get out of Max Crosby. Let's add a guy like Braden Fisk to just get upfield and wreak havoc in the interior of the opposition's offensive line. All right, Mr. C. Prasky, we're on the clock here in Seattle. I know you need a linebacker. The question is who? Question is who? For my money, for right now at this moment, I don't know why people hate him. I guess there's concerns about his athleticism. We'll see. We'll find out in the combine. But for now, Jeremiah Trotter is the next linebacker off the board for me. Okay, back to Duval here. Let's recap. And by the way, Seattle fan, my only other selection for Seattle to this point was Jackson Powers Johnson in the first round. Jacksonville, we selected Terrion Arnold in the first and Dominic Pooney in the second. So I think two guys that are going to come in and contribute mightily right out of the gate. Not sure exactly what's going to happen with Josh Allen, although they should not spare any expense to bring him back. He is the one constant on that defense, but you can never have enough pass rushers. And again, you don't know what's going to happen necessarily with that contract. So Jonah Ellis is the pick here, which takes us to Tennessee. And this was part of that trade earlier in which the Bengals went up about 9 spots in order to acquire Keon Coleman. Tennessee drops down, selects Roman Wilson, a bit more polished, maybe not necessarily the physical specimen of a Keon Coleman, but a more polished receiver, a more accomplished receiver. And then actually moved up about close to 30 spots here. I'm going to go back to the offensive line, right? I want to give Will Levis every opportunity to be successful. We took Olu Fashanu in the first round, followed that up with Roman Wilson. You pair him up with the Hopkins, Traylon Burks of the world. I think you got a nice trio of receivers there, assuming Burks can stay healthy. I just want to put the final touches on an offensive line group that really struggled. And again, when Tennessee was at their best, this was a position group of strength. There's a lot of work to do on the defensive side of the ball, but not going to get it all done all the time in every draft, right? And then, of course, there's 4 additional rounds. Of course, we're only doing 3 in this mock draft. So give me Cedric Van Pran, who seemingly has fallen out of favor, but I still like him. There's nothing on tape for me that suggests that he can't be a long-term starter in this league, an above-average starter in this league for a long time. Hey, Mr. C. Prasky, we're right back on the clock here, man. So Jackson Powers Johnson, the first, as I mentioned, followed by Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And now there may be more pressing items. There may be more pressing concerns at this point. But I'm gonna roll the dice here, Mr. C. Prasky. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Let's go with Spencer Rattler here. We got a new coaching staff in here. I'm not suggesting that Spencer Rattler is the answer long term, but the upside is certainly there. He has intriguing tools, and I think he had a really solid week in Mobile. So let's bring Spencer Rattler into the fold. All right, Colts fans, we have addressed the down line by adding Jared Verse in the first round, and then I believe we followed that up with the receiver in the second round. There we have it, Adonai Mitchell. I want to address the quarterback position and a player that I like, whether you decide to play him outside or inside the numbers, I like him quite a bit. Give me Max Melton out of Rutgers. That takes us to the Los Angeles Rams. And to this point, we have selected Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, as well as Chris Braswell out of Alabama. So back-to-back picks on the defensive side of the ball, guys that we think are going to make immediate impacts for sure. I'm going to keep it going on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to keep it going, and I'm going to bring in big McKinley Jackson, man. Disruptive force up front. All right, Steelers fans, to this point, we have selected Amarius Mims as well as TJ Tampa. So 2 huge eyesores, the corner opposite Joey Porter Jr. and that tackle position. The last piece, in my opinion, as far as the offensive line is concerned, is the center position. And I think the best of the rest is very much Bo Limmer. All right, Miami Dolphins forfeit their pick, which puts the Houston Texans back on the clock. A quick recap of what we've done for the Texans. Jerzon Newton, I mean, there isn't a better fit, in my opinion, as it relates to player, team, and scheme. In the first round, you have Newton. Second round, we took Cam Hart. I'm probably higher than most on Cam Hart, but I think Cam Hart forms a nice pair there with Derek Stingley Jr. And we're going to add a weapon. We're going to add a weapon for our young superstar, C.J. Stroud, at the quarterback position. Jatavian Sanders, man. Let's bring in Jatavian Sanders. He's a better inline run blocker than I think people generally have given him credit for, and he can be a quality passing game threat. You already have Nico Collins and of course, Tank Dell on the boundary. You add Jatavian Sanders to that mix. I think he ultimately is an upgrade to Dalton Schultz. All right, we're back with the Cleveland Browns. In the second round, we took Michael Hall to add to an impressive, already very impressive defense. Let's add a weapon for Deshaun Watson here among the receivers. Jalen Polk. Jalen Polk is a nice compliment to Amari Cooper, his ability to stretch the field. I expect Cedric Tillman to take a step. Of course, David Njoku, he's arrived. He's arrived under under Joe Flacco, so hopefully he can continue to keep it going. But Polk should be a nice addition to a nice set of weapons here in Cleveland. Okay, we got Dallas on the clock here, and I think it's time. I think it's time for a running back, and I think I'm a big fan of Braylon Allen. I'm a huge fan of Braylon Allen. I actually believe have Jonathan Brooks as my top running back, but I think from a system perspective, I believe Braylon Allen, who is my second ranked running back, and just a hair behind Jonathan Brooks. I think the system is just a better fit for Braylon Allen. So give me the running back out of Wisconsin. I know PFF is down. I know a lot of people are down on him, but you check the 2022, 2021 tape, and I think that just the change in system is what really hurt him in 2023. Okay, that takes us to Green Bay, who is also in the market for a running back. And I'm going to go with the aforementioned top running back. As far as my board is concerned, I think he's just a much better fit in Green Bay. And of course, I don't have to rush him back. I think he got one more year of Aaron Jones at least. And Jonathan Brooks is your man in 2025. So let's go with Jonathan Brooks here. Okay. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Bucks. And again, Drew, I am going out of my way to upset you in this particular draft. We went with Cooper DeJean in the first round, followed by Peyton Wilson in the second. I think two guys that are going to immediately bolster that defense, get back to playing championship caliber defense in Tampa Bay. It doesn't stop there, though. It doesn't stop there. And again, Drew, you're going to have to figure something out either on day 3 in this draft, or perhaps you've already addressed it via free agency, because I'm going with Austin Booker out of Kansas. I think him and Yaya Diaby can do some serious damage off the edge. Okay. As I mentioned before, the Arizona Cardinals are going to be busy. This is their 6th selection in this 3-round mock draft. To this point, we have selected Marvin Harrison Jr., Kool-Aid McKinstry, Trot Robinson, Junior Colson, Chris Jenkins. I'll go back to the secondary. And a season ago, the Cardinals selected Garrett Williams, got him at a bit of a discount here coming off of an injury. Kalen Carson has struggled with injury throughout his career, but he's a playmaker on the boundary. So we're looking at a Kool-Aid McKinstry, Garrett Williams, Kalen Carson led cornerback trio here in Arizona. And I like it. I like it, particularly with those young edge rushers. We've added Chris Jenkins and Junior Colson up the middle of that defense. Kalen Carson is a pick here, 90th overall. Okay, that takes us back to the Green Bay Packers. So one more recap for Green Bay here. Green Bay started with Tyler Guyton, Tyler Nubin. Again, just can't imagine him in a different uniform to this point. Mike Sainristil to really round out what has the makings of being a very impressive secondary. Just selected Jonathan Brooks, who again we can wait on. We still have Aaron Jones, who's still playing at a pretty high level in the backfield. We can wait on Jonathan Brooks and hand the keys to him in 2025 and be a part of that second half of the season, that run that you hopefully get on as your team is starting to take form with fresh legs. To finish it here, this 3-round mock draft for Green Bay Packers, I'm going to add some size up front, continue to bolster the depth and add some size up front. Let's go with Dwayne Carter right here. Okay, so the Lions are back on the clock, and our final recap of the Lions in this 3-round mock draft. We started with Enos Rayshaw Jr. Really want to bolster the cornerback position here. We traded away our 2nd-round pick in order to acquire Haason Reddick, and again, that is a move to kind of push all your chips in the middle of the table. You were just a half away from a Super Bowl berth. Go out there and get someone to pair up with Aiden Hutchinson on the edge. I went with some size at the quarterback, going back to the quarterback position with Kyrie Jackson, 73rd overall. Now I'm gonna add a piece to the offensive line. I think I alluded to it earlier. You know, the contract situation is changing. Big money is going to be paid to Penix Sewell, obviously. You know, the likes of a Jonah Jackson, Vitae. Those guys may not necessarily be part of your long-term plans just because dollars and cents, you know what I mean? The numbers don't necessarily add up. So I want to add a piece here just to hold off the attrition and continue to have a position group of strength here along the offensive line. Give me Isaiah Adams. He's listed as a tackle here, but as a guard, I think he certainly could be selected here in day two. Baltimore on the clock. In the first round, selected Brian Thomas Jr. Second round, went to the defensive side of the ball, got Adisa Isaac, an edge that I really like quite a bit. I think he'll have an excellent career here in Baltimore. We're going to add some teeth to this defensive line, right? You know, you got some aging players. Justin Madubuike, he's unrestricted free agent. Hopefully they figure that part of it out. But if by some chance he gets out of Baltimore, you're going to have to find a way to kind of mitigate that loss here. And I think Mekhi Wingo certainly can help, along with Travis Jones up front. One last look at what we've done for New England. Of course, at the very top, well, not the very top, but the third overall pick, we traded down with the Falcons trading up to select Jayden Daniels. New England took Rome Odunze eighth overall, traded back into the first round in order to select J.J. McCarthy. And I don't think we've done anything. Oh, actually, we did early in the third round, Blake Fisher to bolster that offensive line. And I think the last piece of this mock draft here for New England is a player I think actually fit in pretty well to replace Kyle Duggar. I'm not sure Kyle Duggar is going to re-up with New England. So let's go with Cole Bishop, a favorite of mine at the safety position. Okay, we got KC back on the clock here. In the first round, we started the process, the healing process, as I like to call it, of life after Chris Jones, assuming Chris Jones isn't back in Kansas City after this season, after this last Super Bowl run. Byron Murphy in the first round added, I think that perhaps the guy that they've been looking for to fill that particular role in Kansas City, and Xavier Worthy. The speed is different out of the young man from Texas. And here I can stand to go back to the defensive line. You could certainly address the corner position because we're not necessarily expecting L'Jarius Sneed to be back. DJ James is a guy that I came away impressed. His teammate Pritchett also impressed me. Ronaldo Green, Jerry and Jones are talented in their own right. Very, very down on Kalen King. I'm not done with Josh Newton. I'm not done with Josh Newton. I wouldn't necessarily rule him out completely. But you know what? You know what? I like Kansas City's ability to develop their defensive backs coach. For whatever reason, isn't necessarily getting any opportunities from a defensive coordinator perspective. I think that may change despite having multiple guys on the all-pro team. Let's go back to the defensive line here. Let's go back to the defensive line. And I'm going to get Drew's guy here, Tyler Davis, up front. So between Byron Murphy, Tyler Davis, you hope to be able to absorb some of that loss of Chris Jones potentially. Just a handful of more picks here. The Jaguars are back on the clock. We'll recap the Jaguars. Had a good draft to this point. Terry and Arnold in the first, followed by Dominic Pooney in the second, and I believe they had an early third-round pick because we're in the compensatory picks now. Jonah Ellis was the first of 2 third-round selections. We're going to finalize it with Ricky Pearsall, right? We may not necessarily have Calvin Ridley back, so Ricky Pearsall is the pick. There you go, Drew. I've been busy with the Saints because, as I mentioned, they have a lot of work to do. Perhaps the worst contract cap situation in the NFL, and a bit of an albatross of a contract at the quarterback position as well. Traded down in the first round. Still came away with our starting left tackle. Feel good about that. In the second round, added Brandon Dorlus, a big favorite of mine in this particular draft. He could play all along that defensive line. Dominic Poon, that's for the Jags. Christian Mahogany. It probably solidifies with Mahogany and Kingsley out of BYU. You probably solidify the left side of your offensive line with those 2 selections. Mahogany can play right guard as well, obviously. Feel good about what we've done with respect to the offensive line and defensive line. It's been a meat and potatoes draft to this point for the Saints. And listen, we might need to keep it going. We might have to keep it going along the defensive line, although you're staring at some expiring contracts at the safety position. After 2024, I think both Tyrann Mathieu, who obviously is a bit older at this juncture, and Maye will be unrestricted free agents. So Let's think ahead a little bit here. Again, we're trying to, and maybe it's sooner rather than later, considering the contract situations and the lack of cap space. So let's go Tyke Smith here. A couple of names here that I really like: Jaden Hicks, Taylor Demerson, Sion Vaki. I'm gonna go with Tyke Smith for the time being, but I have a little bit more work to do here on the safeties. San Francisco actually traded out of the first round, selected Christian Haynes. I feel great about that. I don't even think it's crazy to take Christian Haynes in the first round, but you're able to, improve your draft positioning by trading down a few slots later in the draft. So that worked out well. We added Brendan Rice towards the end of the second round. Javon Foster, I really like his upside at the tackle position, his ability to move in his own scheme as well. I think you've already improved your offensive line. That came back to bite him a little bit here in the Super Bowl, particularly that right side. This goes a long way, I think, in terms of remedying those issues. So, with the final pick here in the mock draft for the San Francisco 49ers, I want to make sure that we have a quality rotation up front along that defensive line. And let's go with Rook or Horo. All right. Add him to the mix there. More physicality up front. Okay. So, Bills fans, Bills are electric. It's a bit of a different approach. We're going to look different, man, but it really is a byproduct of my faith in what Josh Allen is capable of. I think Josh Allen has the stuff. He's made of the stuff. They can perhaps take a little bit of a step back as far as the amount of assets that they're putting into the skill position or on the perimeter specifically. Of course, we added Xavier Legette in the second round, but we started off with Darius Robinson, man. The physicality and the position flexibility to play inside, outside, I think is indispensable. He's a tone setter for sure and a leader. You have Edgerrin Cooper, my top linebacker in the class. We saw what it looked like without Matt Milano and then kind of that revolving door of linebackers. I want playmakers on this defense, and I think Robinson and Cooper are playmakers. They just didn't have it, and that's part of the reason why they weren't able to get over the hump yet again. They just haven't been able to make enough plays, get that key stop when they need it on defense. All right. And then now, mind you, that trade to get the 39th pick from the Giants resulted in moving off of Stefon Diggs. And again, based on what I saw from Diggs at the end of the season, I think a parting of ways is probably best for both organization and player. I'm a big fan of Xavier Legette. I think he and Darius Slayton, whom I intended to be part of that trade that sent Diggs to the Giants, can help mitigate that particular loss. The offense, the passing game, I think really needs to go through Dalton Kincaid. It absolutely needs to go through Dalton Kincaid. And then here we are in the third round, compensatory pick, the 99th overall selection. We need to add somebody to this secondary. Again, expiring contracts, guys getting longer in the tooth, injuries. Certain players not necessarily playing up to snuff. Give me DJ James. I really like what I've seen from him. He's battle tested in the SEC, sticky in man coverage, gets his hands on the football as well, increases INT total every year that he's played. So give me DJ James. Okay, last two selections. We have the Rams and the Commanders. So let's recap both those teams here. Drake Maye, the second overall pick to the Commanders. Quinion Mitchell to the Rams, 19th overall. Braylon Trice, 36 overall to the Commanders, as well as Zach Frazier with the 40th overall pick. Chris Braswell in the second round to the Rams. I like the way we started that. Washington comes back to the defensive side of the ball with Jarvis Brownlee here in the third round. I kept it going. I kept it going on the defense. That's really the name of the game here for the Rams. McKinley Jackson in with the 83rd overall pick, and I think we can give the offense a little, love here. Let's add another receiver to the mix. You got Cooper Kupp, who's dealt with some injuries here. Puka Nacua obviously had a remarkable rookie season. Let's add Jalen McMillan to the mix, right? You're looking for that intelligence, the understanding, the ability to play multiple receiver positions. Of course, he's going to be primarily in the slot. I think he would be an excellent third option here in the passing game. All right. And finally, our last pick here in the mock draft. I mentioned, I recapped the Commanders draft earlier. Of course, Drake Maye was the first selection of the Commanders, the second overall pick. Let's go get his top wideout and Tez Walker, guy who slid on the board here, but I think this is a good landing spot here with familiar quarterback. All right, everyone. That's gonna do it. That's gonna do it for this 3-round mock draft. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Did I do your team? Did I do your team justice? Did I screw the pooch? Let me know what you think. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. All right. I'll take myself off and scroll through for you.